Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. I hope that you're all doing well and that you are enjoying 2022 so far. So today I've got a review for you of this huge book which is called The History of Tarot Art, Demystifying the Art and Arcana Deck by Deck. And this is by Holly Adams Easley and Esther Joy Archer. And I do want to say thank you very much to Quarto Publishing Group for sending me out a copy of this book in exchange for this review. So let's get straight to the review. This beautiful book was created by two authors, Holly Adams Easley and Esther Joy Archer, and they're also known as @HollyEnchanted and @Celestial Esther on Instagram. Esther started working with tarot in her late 20s as a tool for self-empowerment. She is a tarot reader, deck creator, collector and educator. She lives with her husband, dogs and collection of reptiles in South Korea, where she also teaches at an elementary school. Holly Adams Easley was introduced to tarot by a nun, and she too studies, collects and reads tarot cards, and she's an academic advisor by day. The two ladies also have a weekly podcast called Wildly Tarot, which is where the inspiration for this book came from. As usual, I will put all of the links to their works, their projects and social media in the description. The book itself then is beautifully presented. It actually comes in a hardback case, so this outer bit is the hardback case and then the book is inside. So it's got all of this beautiful artwork on the front and on the back. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit more information about the book itself. So as I mentioned, the book is beautifully presented, and on the back cover there are little pockets that contain 24 tarot cards. The blurb on the back sums up everything about what comes with the book, so I'll just quickly read that to you. Guided by Holly Adams Easley and Esther Joy Archer, hosts of the popular Wildly Tarot podcast, this deluxe collector's book provides a fresh look at the influence of tarot from its beginnings to today. The elegant slipcase, removable solar busker tarot cards, an illustrated fold-out timeline with important dates in tarot development make this package a must-have for any tarot fan. The history of tarot art shows how tarot morphed from a 15th century card game to a popular modern activity. Learn more about the stories behind the art of tarot's most influential decks, like Rider-Waite-Smith and Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot, as well as the female artists whose work was often overshadowed in their time. The history of tarot art also takes a close look at the Visconti, Solar Busker, Tarot de Marseille, Aquarian, Morgan Greer, Motherpiece, Cosmic, Druidcraft, Wild Unknown and Deviant Moon decks, alongside dozens of contemporary decks. The book also provides tips for doing your own tarot readings and a cheat sheet on the meanings of the Rider-Waite-Smith, Thoth and Tarot de Marseille cards. Both long-time tarot practitioners and newcomers to the practice are sure to find fascinating new insights in this retrospective. On to some of my thoughts about the book then. Now I'm not going to hold the book up the whole time because it's actually really heavy, but I will show you some little sneak peeks at the insides of the book, so some of the beautiful tarot art that's included as well, as I go through my thoughts. But I usually make notes as I'm reading the book, so I read this over the Christmas sort of break, Christmas period, and I was making notes as I was going through it of all the things that I wanted to talk about, and there were quite a lot of things that I noted down, so I'm not sure how long this review is going to be, but it's going to be very comprehensive and very detailed. But like I said, I will show you lots of bits and things inside the book as well, which is definitely worth a look. So just looking at the book cover itself then made me excited. All of the different art styles and the depictions of the cards, and I will say that if you didn't have a wish list of tarot cards or tarot decks before reading this book, then you will definitely will do afterwards. I wasn't sure how the book was going to be organised at first, but they've decided to organise it by the tarot decks that they look at, which obviously makes sense. So it's one chapter per tarot deck. And I did think that they would look at a lot of different decks and feature lots of different ones, but actually they've been very specific in their choice of decks that they look at, and the ones that they've chosen to really focus on. So like I said before, and like it says in the blurb, they are the tarot decks that they believe and that have been seen to be really influential throughout tarot history. The last chapter though, it does focus on more contemporary decks and decks that you've probably seen around and about on Instagram and things, and I think that there are so many more tarot decks now, and it's something that the girls do mention in the book, because it's just so much easier for tarot creators and artists and creators just to get their work and their tarot decks independently published. For each of the decks that they explore then, they've included the date that it was created, where it was created, so where in the world it was created, and also the creator. So this does add a lot to the organisation of the book, in that it starts with obviously the oldest decks and then works its way up to today, more modern and contemporary decks. And it's really great because you can see just how much tarot has developed through history, sort of starting in Italy and moving through France and mainland Europe. It looks at some decks from England and then does tend to focus on a lot of decks that have been created in America, in the United States. But it was really nicely organised because it allows you to sort of follow the tarot journey, how it's changed and how it's evolved within society, and also within the context in which those decks were created, so the time period in which they were being created. It is widely believed that tarot started as a card game in Italy, so the book does start with the Visconti tarot, because obviously that's one of the oldest decks, if not the first, or sort of one of the first incarnations of the game tarot. I have always wanted an Italian tarot deck, partly because obviously that's where tarot originated, but also because I do have some Italian heritage in my family, so I just feel like it would be nice to own or to have an Italian deck. But apparently there isn't a complete surviving Visconti tarot deck, so the authors do mention in the book that the Devil, the Tower, the Knight of Coins and the Three of Swords are the cards that are missing from the decks that we sort of still have today, which are obviously in museums and in private collections and things. So you can probably get a Visconti tarot, but those 4 cards will be additions, I suppose. They won't be the original artwork or from the original artwork. They'll be more of a reimagining, I suppose. It was something that I wanted to look into, but then I moved on to the next chapter, which was the Solar Busca Tarot, and I've probably just butchered that name, I apologise, but I really did love the artwork of that one even more. So then I was set on finding a reproduction of that one, so you can see what I mean about the impact this book is probably going to have on your tarot wish list. So these 2 very early decks were most likely created for the card game Tarocchi, rather than sort of divinatory purposes that we would use them for today. But that does bring me on to one of the great things about this book, and that is the history. Now obviously it's in the title, but they are exploring the history of tarot through these different tarot decks that they look at. Tarot does have a really mysterious history in that it's very difficult to pin down and actually determine where it all started. But I do think that the authors have put together an almost definitive tarot history. Now I say almost definitive because, as they do admit in the book, it's not something that can be ultimately proven, I suppose. But one of the things that I did appreciate was their acknowledgement of sort of alternative theories and things that we can't really be 100% accurate or sure about. So it's not a definitive history, it's more of a very comprehensive one, if that makes sense. Moving on then to look at some of the more well-known decks that they featured in the book. I loved the way that they explored the influence of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and they did choose to focus on Pamela Colman-Smith, who is of course the artist behind all of those instantly recognisable images on the tarot cards. And they do stress how important it is that she gets the recognition that she deserves for this tarot deck, because it is her images, it's her images on the cards that have stood the test of time and that are still recognised over 100 years later, and she didn't get this sort of the recognition that she deserved when the cards came out. And I realised while I was reading this chapter how terrible it was that I still don't have my own copy of this deck, and so that one was another one for the wish list. One deck that I was particularly interested in reading about was the Mother Peace Tarot. It was one of those decks that I've come across previously, but I did want to know a little bit more about. I just loved the idea of a feminist deck from the 80s, but I actually did want to know a little bit more about the deck itself, and it did turn out that there was a lot more to the history of the deck and the art depicted on it than I was initially aware of. So the authors did deal with some of the more problematic areas of this particular deck really well. They were able to acknowledge and appreciate the significance of the deck when it came out and the context in which it was created, with it being a feminist deck. However, they also address the problematic issues and the problematic aspects of it, such as the cultural appropriation and the hints of racism that were featured in the deck. So it's something that a more modern audience wouldn't really be able to look past. So actually this was a deck that I originally wanted, but now it's probably one that I don't think I would use for divinatory purposes. This is one of the occasions where the You Might Also Like section that they feature at the end of each chapter really came in handy. So they include maybe one or two decks that were inspired by or influenced by or are very similar to the style of the deck that they've just looked at. So I was completely drawn to the Dark Days Tarot, which is a feminist deck. And although it is a little bit more modern, it's not from the 80s, it really stood out to me, and that was another one that I added to my wish list. It was also really great to see the Wild Unknown Tarot in the book. It was my first ever tarot deck. It introduced me to tarot, and I just remember seeing those images and just being so intrigued by it. I think, like a lot of other people that were drawn to this deck, they just felt a connection to the images, and for me as well, it was the fact that there wasn't a human component to that deck. The images feature animals, they feature nature and other elements. So, like the authors mentioned in the book, and one of the things that I do love about this deck is the idea that it's open to personal interpretation. It just made me realise, I think, how important this deck and how influential the Wild Unknown Tarot was for contemporary tarot readers. I hope that you can tell at this point just how seriously interesting I found this book. It's not just the history that I appreciated, but the depth and the detail that Esther and Holly have gone to. They must have done some serious research for this book. They explore so much more than just the art on the cards. They look at other influences such as family politics, the occult and the esoteric, and even fashion and how that's been influenced by tarot and how tarot has influenced it. I really want to share so much of this book with you, but obviously I can't do that. But I think it shows just how interesting it is, and I was fascinated the whole way through. I do feel like this book has really deepened my understanding of tarot, not just the history of tarot, but where the art has come from and where it started. So we all know and we're all familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and the art style is sort of definitive. It's seen as the original, sort of the ultimate tarot art, I suppose. But even that was influenced by what came before it. that was a deck of the early 20th century, but it has taken inspiration from the tarot decks of the 1400s. It makes you appreciate the artwork on tarot a lot more, knowing sort of the inspiration and the original thoughts behind it, and I think it will add depth to a lot of tarot readers and their readings. Obviously, one of the best things about the book is the tarot art, and the fact that they've collected together some of the most important art that's been featured on tarot decks. It's all stunning throughout the book, but personally I found that I prefer more contemporary images and designs of tarot cards, but it's good because I also can understand and appreciate the detail of the older decks as well. So in terms of criticism then, and I hate to say criticism because it sounds so harsh, it's more of something that I would like to change about the book, I suppose. So firstly, I would have loved it if it came with a full Solar Busker tarot deck. So I understand there are probably reasons they didn't come with a full deck, but I feel like it needed a full deck. I mean, I do like that they've included those cards in it. It's really nice to have a look at those sort of older art stylings. And I think there are 24 cards from that deck that they've included, and that's really nice, like I said. But I sort of think to myself, what am I going to do with just the 24 cards, if that makes sense? I need a full deck, you know. I think I'm definitely going to look at getting one anyway, but it would have been nice if we would have got the full deck with the book. But like I said, very, very small criticism, and there is probably a reason that they couldn't include the whole deck as well. Another thing then, and I have mentioned that I loved all of the art and all of the tarot history that's in the book, but there was one chapter that I just didn't find interesting, and it was the chapter on the Druid Craft Tarot. I'm not sure what it was. Maybe I just didn't like the art style, it just didn't appeal to me, or I just didn't feel like that deck had a particular significance to me. I don't know. I think people will enjoy the chapters about the decks that they really like, which I suppose seems obvious, but for me that was just one particular chapter and deck that I wasn't as interested in. Similarly, I wasn't sure how I felt about the inclusion of the Deviant Moon Tarot. I have seen that one around a lot, sort of on the internet, on Instagram and things, but it is a very striking deck, definitely, but I don't like it. In the book, the authors say that they have included it because it was seen as a darker sort of tarot deck, and it opened up tarot to people who maybe appreciated more shadowy and macabre things, which I definitely do. And they also say it's a cross between Tim Burton and Salvador Dali. Now, I love Tim Burton, I love Salvador Dali, but if that's what this deck is a combination of, then I don't know, I just don't like that particular deck. For me, I think there are a lot more decks out there that are sort of better in terms of having a more darker edge to it or a more macabre feeling, but again, that is totally a personal preference thing. As I mentioned earlier, they do offer a quick glimpse at some more contemporary tarot decks, so decks that have come onto the market in more recent years. And obviously this is an area that is going to change quite quickly, and that section's not always going to be up to date. But for me personally, I think it's the history, all of the decks that have come before leading up to today that is not going to change, that is the best part of the book for me. Towards the end of the book, they have also included a fold-out timeline, which is nice, and a few cheat sheets for card meanings. There are also a few pages on getting started in tarot reading and tarot spreads. The timeline is a nice addition, but I feel like the other little bits are not really necessary. I can understand why they may have included them, but if you are interested in tarot reading and getting started with tarot reading, then a book that is specifically dedicated to that would be a lot more useful getting started. Lastly, something which I don't usually mention is the paper of the book itself. It is really great quality, so the book is very big and very sturdy, And like I said, the paper is just great quality, which means that the images and the printing of the tarot art is just so much better. You get to see all the details and the little qualities and the colours of all of the cards really well. Right, time for some final thoughts then. I feel like this has been quite a long review, so we will see how long it comes out when I edit it. So apologies if I have been rambling, but summing up then, I think that anybody that has an interest in tarot will absolutely love this book. If you are a tarot enthusiast or a tarot reader, whether you're reading cards for yourself or you're doing it for other people, then I would say it is a must read. Purely because it offers so much about the history of tarot and how we read tarot today, and it just puts into perspective how far tarot has come sort of as a divination practice. And I think it will add another level of depth to your understanding of the cards themselves. So even if you just want to look at the images and the pictures within the book, then you can get so much from it. I do love that the authors have reiterated that tarot is not something that is set in stone. It's something that's open to interpretation and personal intuition, and it's open to everyone. There should be no gatekeeping in tarot. So if you are interested in it, and maybe you didn't feel like you were someone who could practice tarot or read tarot, then just know that it is open to everyone and anyone. You don't have to have any special skills or knowledge to be able to start or pick it up. And this book is definitely a lovely introduction to the history of tarot art. I think the final thing I'm going to say about this book is just how much I loved it, and that I did read it in one afternoon evening. So I started reading it one afternoon and I just kept reading and reading until, I think I did stay up until after midnight, but I did finish it. So it just shows you how much I loved it and how interesting I found it. Okay, that's it for today's review, guys. I hope that you enjoyed it and you found it useful. The book is out now, it's out already, so if you do decide to pick it up or get yourself a copy, or maybe you already have it and you've read it, then do let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear those. So yeah, just share those in the comments for me, please. And then I just want to say thank you again for watching, and thank you to Quarto Publishing Group for sending me a copy of this book. It's going to take pride of place on my bookshelf. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.